When you look at wildlife conservation today, you have to recognize that there is an indelible human fingerprint on every ecosystem in the planet. From a very small fingerprint in the Congo rainforest that maybe are under the vagaries of climate change, all the way through to islands that have humans on them that are pressing on habitat and wildlife, specifically if non-native wildlife has been introduced to those systems. And as such, humans have to take responsibility to steward those ecosystems, to make them as best as they possibly can be, to sustain the biodiversity, so that wildlife and biodiversity is around for my kids, your grandkids one day to see. That is what we need to do as humans. There's arguably no greater place in which this little ecosystem, this cosm of interaction is happening than in New Zealand. And the New Zealanders are arguably the champions of this conservation model all around the world because they've been living with it for so many years. New Zealand, again, is an island that has a booming human population. In 2023, they saw the greatest growth rate in their population, 2.3%, since 1946, since World War II. If you rewind the clock 20 years to the beginning of 2000, New Zealand's population has grown 25% to 5.3 million people today. So if there ever was a place in which humans needed to be involved in wildlife conservation and ecosystem management, New Zealand's it. And let me reiterate, New Zealand, because of those facts, are at the spear tip of this conservation front line. And they're doing incredible work. And arguably, there is no greater crown jewel of sustainable wildlife and ecosystem management than the Fiordland Wapiti Foundation. I have been there, I have put traps in the ground, I have walked the walk and talked the talk with the folks that are involved. And so I have an opportunity to tell you how great a job they do. New Zealand is full of non-native animals, from sheep to possums to deer. New Zealand's also full and very rich with public land, with crown land. And unfortunately, that crown land and public land often looks like Middle Earth of Lord of the Rings, which makes management that falls on the government very tricky. And when I say tricky, it means logistically challenging, which also means very, very expensive. And if this is government land, then the government needs to pay for it. And if it's very, very expensive, that burden is going to end up at the feet of the taxpayer of New Zealand. That's how wildlife management works on public ground through government programs. So what if a nonprofit stepped up and said, government, we want to help you. We want to execute the mission. We want to execute the objectives. We will work with you. We will take the burden of cost away from you. And we will create a value chain of the species that we are working with. As such, multiple wins, right? A non-native species is being valued. Native biodiversity is being championed. Native biodiversity is being enhanced and sustained. And a balance is being put in place where numbers are reduced to execute the mission and the purpose, which is to sustain and increase native fauna and flora biodiversity. Let me give you some context here. The Fiordland National Park is 12.5 million hectares large, okay? The Fiordland Wapiti Foundation, the area in which they manage wapiti, is 175,000 hectares. If you do the quick math, it's just a little over 10% of the area. Over the last 5 years, 50% of the deer that have been removed from 12.5 million hectares came out of that 175,000 hectare block because of the work of Fiordland Wapiti Foundation. You have to ask the question why? Because they care. Because they're creating a value for New Zealanders to come to do that work. Who is doing the management, the suppression of wapiti in that area? Volunteers and hunters. Oh, and by the way, the funding, it's coming from the people. It's coming from the charity. Even coming from us, from North America, from Blood Origins. We sent $38,000 to do trapline work in Fiordland because of the great work that the Fiordland Wapiti Foundation is doing. The trapping program alone has 500 traps in the Glassnock Valley, the Nitz Valley, the Worsley Valley, and the Castle Valley. The Fiordland Wapiti Foundation has taken one more step. They maintain the tracks, they maintain the huts for everyone to enjoy. Hunters, non-hunters, New Zealanders, and citizens from all over the world. Everything that I've just described is in jeopardy now. The Forest and Bird, an anti-use wildlife organization in New Zealand, has taken legal action against the New Zealand government to say you need to eradicate wapiti. This is the same organization that came out just as COVID hit to say we need to eradicate tar because of their impact on the landscape. Here's what I need to know. Forest and Bird, you're a pro-native fauna and flora organization in New Zealand. Have you invested in any work in Fiordland National Park? Has Forest and Bird spent any money putting trap lines, maintaining trap lines in Fiordland National Park? The answer is no, none. Has Forest and Bird decided to go into Fiordland using their funding to reduce the quantity of wapiti and red stags in Fiordland National Park so that native fauna and flora can be maximized, can be sustained, can be enhanced? Nope. The answer is no. So what's Forest and Bird's method? They're going to sue the government. They're going to sue the government to say what the Fiordland Wapiti Foundation is doing there is not right. They need to be gone. And you, the government, need to go in there and you need to eradicate these wapiti. You need to pay for it, government. The entity that has done a yeoman's job of improving and sustaining and conserving kiwi, Whio, Kea, multiple native flora species. Yep, you're out. We don't want you there anymore. That's crazy. Absolutely nuts. The pathway is to sue the government to increase the cost funding burden on the government, which, where's that going to end up? It's going to end up with the taxpayer. That's how an economic system works anywhere in the world. If I had to look into a crystal ball, wapitis first, seekers next, tar is next after that. They don't want anybody using any of the non-native species. And all of these organizations are doing absolutely incredible work to sustain native flora and fauna all across New Zealand. I don't get it. So let's ask this basic question. What is the most successful pathway forward for native flora and fauna biodiversity conservation in New Zealand? Is it the removal of a dedicated volunteer wildlife professional base and replace it with a government-funded, taxpayer-burdened system that really doesn't have any funding tied to it, that never utilizes the animal, leaves it to rot on the side of the mountain, with actually not very good potential of eradication at the end of the day, and no entity now on the ground doing the nest predation trap work that is necessary to conserve the native fauna of New Zealand? Or a non-profit entity that's bringing value to the system across multiple fronts, a system that pays for itself, that utilizes all of the resource for all New Zealanders, from food going to burger fuel to soup kitchens, and implements on a volunteer basis massive efforts to sustain and conserve native fauna in these most difficult landscapes that you can imagine. At the end of the day, are increasing abundances of iconic New Zealand biodiversity. You tell me which one you want. If you want to help the Fiordland Wapiti Foundation, go find their website, donate today. They need all the funds they can possibly get to defend this legal action from Forest and Bird on the government. We need to help them because every cent is going to matter in this fight. This is tar-Maggedon in 2000. Now it's Wapiti-Maggedon, essentially. They're coming after another iconic wildlife conservation success story around the world. And the Fiordland Wapiti Foundation needs all the help they can get.